Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
All right, well, welcome to the About podcast, where we talk about all things financial health and life in general. As always, I'm Jeremy Scott, one of your co-hosts here, and of course, joined ably, as always, by Roy. Roy, how you doing today?
I am superb. I'm glad to be here. It's been a busy morning already, so I'm excited to go into this topic too, because it's very interesting to me. Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting one that maybe feels distant for some of us, but maybe not. And so we are joined, as we often like to be, by an amazing expert in her field. Today it is Brandy Randolph from Senior Care Authority, and I have your official title as Elder Care Consultant and Placement Specialist.
Yes.
That is a great handle.
Yes.
I can't believe it all fits on a business card, but I bet it does. So, Brandy, obviously today we're going to talk about senior care, and placement makes me think of, especially things like long-term care or, retirement care or something like that. But why don't you give us a brief little intro of what it is that you do and specialize in? So
I'm actually going to interject first.
Oh, are you going to?
Yeah, because I want to talk about a little bit how I met her.
Oh, yeah, please.
And how this plays into things. So in the world of, aging, right, we have a lot of things that happen and decisions that have to be made, and some of them aren't so great, right? But when you get to make a choice versus being told what to do, that is a good distinction of something that you can have control over as you age.
Yes.
So I met Brandy through actually a long-term care expert's sister's company. She's in the same company as you in a different state, and she introduced us to Brandy.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's how we got introduced to Brandy. My company, I should say, got introduced to Brandy, and we had a consult with a client. And I didn't have a clue what you actually did at that point, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But I was impressed with it in regards to the process you went through, and I'm going to have you obviously talk about that here in a second. But being able to have choice is really, really important. And that's one of the things where as you age, you lose that choice. So to use someone like Brandy to kind of keep that choice, that is actually invaluable in my opinion. So you don't feel like you're losing all independence or ability to make any decisions.
Right.
So in this industry, your field, pretty obscure still, but in the last 10 years is really gaining some traction.
Okay.
And understanding all the nuances of what you do, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And she will talk about that when we're talking about different facilities and care and cost and all that stuff. And that's stuff that she has to track. So that's how I was introduced to Brandy. And I wanted to definitely have you talk about your story so you can share it with other people so they know it exists and that it's something out there that people can reach for as a reference and resource.
Yeah. I don't think we've actually said what it is that you do yet. So let's work that in there.
You said
too.
her title, right?
Well,
That's what she does.
Of course. It's clear as day. So.
All right. So first and foremost, I'm an elder care consultant. I'm a senior advocate, but I do specialize in senior placement.
Okay.
And it's absolutely right, what Roy said. It's about somebody having a choice in what happens to them when they get to that point where they might need care. Oftentimes we have a senior that, they're in their home, they have a fall, they go to the hospital, then they go to rehab, and then their family's told, they really can't come home. We have 3 days to find them a place.
Oh.
And they haven't looked anywhere. It's who has an opening right now. The family's scrambling. So what we do is try to help give that family a choice, hopefully ahead of time. So I meet with the family for the placement. We'll talk about placement first. We meet with them. We do about an hour-long assessment. We find out what care needs that senior has, what their budget is, which is where someone, like Roy here can definitely come in. And then we look at what location do they want, what's their personality like, so that they might enjoy certain activities the community has over another. But the biggest thing is the care.
So I want to just one thing real quick, especially people at home who are thinking, well, that can't be particularly common. It is it's crazy how common it is for people to be in that exact situation
Yes.
that you've been in. And I would say, professionally for me, grandma falls, whatever, like I'll get a call because they want me to come do, a visit at the hospital or the rehab, or whatever in my capacity as a pastor. And then when I start talking to the family, like that is the stressor they're putting into. And I got to say, I've probably seen it 24 times.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 years or so, which is a lot. And so it's not uncommon. And people say, well, how can that be? And I'm like, no, it can be. Like that happens a lot, that you find yourself stuck and saying, oh, I've got 3 days to figure this out. And we haven't even started talking about it or thinking about it yet. So the idea of pre-planning or, thinking about it ahead of time, that's what an amazing thing to do. Because I've just seen, I've had people crying on my shoulder about, I don't know what to do, with mom or dad or whatever going on. So that is an important thing. So I just wanted to say, like, this is real, as you know, but people at home know. I mean, it can be, and it's a challenge.
Yeah. And that's a situation. The good news is if that situation happens, I know every single location. And if I don't, my other office knows that location, what kind of care they can do, and I can help them very, very quickly. But it's a lot better when we can avoid that situation and that senior has a choice. Yeah. So instead, they're telling me what they want, and I'm making sure that the care needs fit. And that's one of the big things that somebody doesn't understand. They see a pretty new building and they say, oh, I'm just going to go tour here and hope that this is a good fit. But they might not know that they just got bought out and half their staff quit. They might not know that this person with Parkinson's is likely going to need 2 people to help them transfer towards end of life, and this community only does a 1-person transfer. They might not realize that when I run out of money in 4 years that I'm going to have to leave this community because they don't work with end of age, PACE, or Medicaid. So as most communities are private pay, it's just these big things that we can help plan. So if they are going to run out of money in a couple of years, we find them a place, that can handle that. Or if they're likely to get dementia, from a stroke or Parkinson's, or they're kind of in those beginning stages, we make sure that it has, a memory care on site so that, that transition's a lot easier and they can slowly, get them used to it and move them over if they should need that care.
Yeah, and there's just such a variety in quality.
Yes.
I mean, I have been in, probably not as many as you, but I've been in a lot of, retirement homes or assisted living or any of those kind of places. And sometimes next door to each other. Different facilities, different owners. There's a huge variety in quality of care, quality of facilities. Most of them you think if they're licensed, they're at least safe. But it's sometimes you're like, man, I'm not sure I want somebody to be in here.
No, you're absolutely right. There are some that I help families and I will look anywhere that they want to look. But there are some that I might caution against, at least at that time. Maybe they were great 5 years ago. I've been doing this almost 10 years. But maybe they're going through that transition right now. Right. Or maybe, let's look at this other one first. And there is no place that I will not help a family look. If they want to see a place, we'll go see it.
Sure.
So why don't you talk us through, a little bit about your background. How about that?
Okay,
How did you become to what you're doing today? Just so we have a little bit of understanding there. And then we're going to talk about what do you go through with a client when you sit down with them?
Sure. So I've always been in a consultative role, and I took off a little bit of time when my daughter was young, and I was thinking, okay, she gets to kindergarten, I'm going to make a transition. I don't know what that is yet. And around that time, my father-in-law, he had cancer. And as a family, we ended up caring for him. We also used a home care company to fill in nights and such, but being a caregiver is extremely difficult, and we only did it in shifts. So I can't even imagine, and I hear the stories of somebody who does full-time caregiving. So around that time, we were in that situation where we had to find a rehab very quickly, which at least that's part-time, so it's not quite as scary. But we probably went to 15 places in 3 days.
Wow.
It was insane. I couldn't remember one from another.
It's like buying a house. You're like, which house? Did that house have the cabinets I liked? Or did this? Did that facility have the swimming pool? Or did that facility have the pickle? Yeah,
did that one have a shared room? Did that one have a private?
Yeah.
So during that time, I was talking to the owner of the home care company we were using, and he had heard about what we now call senior placement. And I can tell you, when I started almost 10 years ago, it was almost non-existent. I would go into the communities. They didn't even know we existed. So it was very groundbreaking at that time. And I learned a lot. So from there, I started researching it, and I came across Senior Care Authority. And, he had, the owner had been doing it for quite a few years, and he started franchising. And I thought, you know what? I think that's exactly what I want to do. And I loved that they had a training program. They had things set in place, because I don't like to do anything half-heartedly, and I want to know exactly what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got started, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow.
So can you walk us through like a typical engagement? Like, if somebody wants to come to you, is it usually the person, or maybe kids, or that are, wanting to say, hey, we need to start thinking about mom or dad and, what they're going to get, or like, what does that process look like?
Most of the time,
and especially like ideally, what would your ideal process, like what's the ideal time for somebody to call your number?
The ideal time is before they think they need it, because they usually need it at 6 months to at least a year before that.
And none of them want to accept that they need it.
Well, no, everybody wants to stay home,
Yeah.
right? And so that's a challenge too, is getting people, but things happen.
And that's okay. So the other side of what we do is referrals, to people such as you guys, and, to home care companies. So we do a lot of referrals, and a lot of times this talk can happen even years before the move. Mm-hmm. So I have clients that I've met with that they moved 2, 3, 4 years later, 1 year later. So it's all over the board, but usually that initial conversation is the kids. About 80% of the time, the kids are, I went and visited, they're not doing okay, they think they're doing better than they are, they've had a fall, they've been going to the hospital a lot, mom's losing weight, she's busy taking care of dad has dementia, he's packing stuff every day, And so usually by that point, it should have been done earlier. And the reason I say that is you can acclimate so much more and enjoy what a community has to offer if you come in early. So if you come in while you can still enjoy, the card games a little bit, listening to the music, the dining conversation, before you get to that really high care level, it can be such a more positive experience, and then it's their choice. But yeah, many times that's how it starts, is the kids call us and we go have that initial conversation, and we make sure that, we know what mom and dad wants. And sometimes this means referring a home care company. Mm-hmm. Sometimes this means a safety assessment. Sometimes the kids are out of state, and this is where our elder care consulting comes in. And I can talk a little bit more about that whenever. So,
yeah. Well, that's an extra complication, right? Like, I know I don't live. My mom lives in another state. I don't live anywhere near any of my family. Yeah. So, these conversations, when they do happen, are going to happen from a distance.
Yeah. So with the elder care consulting, I have clients here that have no family. I do wellness visit checks. I go with them to the doctor. I report to the family. I ask those important questions that maybe the senior didn't ask. They don't remember certain details. I do those reports. Maybe I have a client who's visually impaired, and I help her do her pill boxes because she can't read. She can't read it. So, that's a lot of stuff we do. That is an hourly rate. The placement is no cost to the families under most all circumstances, and that's because the communities pay for our service.
Okay.
So anywhere that client picks, so what we do after that assessment, we set up tours to the top places so that they're not going. There's over 700 places in the Denver metro area.
Yeah, they see it popping up all the time.
Yes. So that way they're not running to 30 different places. We go to a couple, right, to start that fit. And when they find that perfect community that feels like home, they select. And then that community pays my service, and it never costs that family more, as long as I'm able to help them and show them the community and introduce them.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it's similar to like real estate agents, or,
exactly.
Somebody helps you do stuff. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that was I witnessed her go through the process with a client of mine, so 2 clients. And it was really interesting to see you ask the questions you asked, which are very in-depth. I mean, very, very in-depth, because, one thing is they had a health situation where if they needed more care, then a lot of assisted living places don't give that care, but some do.
Right.
So they probably want to go in the ones that some do,
right?
Because they'll probably need it. And it was both of them, not just one of them. So that was really interesting too, to help them say, well, do you want to have to move twice? Because if you can't do this, you can't stay there.
Right.
you have to be able to go to a facility that will do that for you.
Yeah, I remember dealing with this with my grandparents. I didn't have to deal with it, but my mom and her generation did, because she had a large history of dementia in her family. So there was always this idea that was probably going to be part of grandma's story towards the end. But they wanted to get into a place earlier, where they could still have independent living, and he still had a car and he could drive, but that could start there, but go all the way through the care that she might eventually, and did needing, eventually end up into memory care, and without having to move, because, grandpa wanted to be close by, they didn't want to be in separate facilities or whatever. And then he actually ended up losing his sight in that time too. And so he needed care around that. So he needed a pretty broad spectrum of care, starting with just, independent living, where they basically had an apartment and, somewhere to go eat every once in a while, but otherwise could take care of themselves, all the way through end of life care, including memory care, which of course is some of the more intensive end of life care you can need. And they were able to do all in one place. But there aren't that many places. They live down in Albuquerque. There's like one place that did all of it.
Yeah. It's definitely not as common to have a place that can do all three.
Yeah.
But they do exist.
Yeah.
So,
but even knowing that something's nearby,
yeah.
I mean, even if it had been a different facility, but the other facility was nearby, or something like that. I mean, just those kind of concerns. You don't think about it. You think about what you need now.
Right. And that's always how it is. But, they might go to an independent living that maybe is a standalone, but it's part of a larger company, so that they don't have to pay a community fee twice, which is basically anytime you go into senior living, there's what's called a community fee. Mm-hmm. And that is a one-time fee. In this area, it ranges between about $2,000 and $15,000. So that, let's say you go to this independent living, the people that need care are probably going to go to their sister assisted living that's maybe 2 miles away. Right. So they'll still have some friends, that end up going over there, but then they're not paying, that community fee twice. And one nice thing is everybody says, I don't want to lose my independence. Mm. But in reality, they're not driving right now. They're relying on everybody to help them. They're not going anywhere. Right. They're isolated. They go into community. They start making friends. They're going to the grocery store on their transportation. They can schedule the transportation that goes 10 miles away. A lot of them have executive chefs. I mean, they're like a cruise ship on land. Right. It is not as it was in the olden days. They have a doctor that can come in there, so they find that they're coming and going more than they did before.
Right. Yeah, being more social, not so just I'm independent, but I'm stuck in my house, but I have a house, so I'm independent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, like our houses are set up for how we live now, right? Which is you have a car outside that you can drive, and all these sorts of other things that we just assume people do. It's got stairs because we're able-bodied and everything, versus a facility that's set up to assume that maybe you don't drive, so we have a solution for that, or maybe you're not able to do stairs, so we have a solution for that, or you're not able to cook for yourself. Mm-hmm. The way I know I have personally seen the difference in people just having access to food, like they were just eating stuff out of a can. I mean, just because they couldn't make it, they couldn't cook the way they used to, so they really couldn't provide balanced diet for themselves, didn't have anybody else to do it. And their health improved dramatically just because they were eating better. Yes. And they had access to fresh fruits and vegetables and things that they weren't doing otherwise because they physically couldn't.
Yeah, and who wants to cook these meals even if you can for one person?
Yeah, for one person. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that is a common one, because cooking for one is very difficult. And when they feel like they're wasting, they're just like, I'll just eat this cracker instead of this healthy meal,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I completely understand that. So then what you're seeing with this profession is growing, but so how do you stay up on all of these different facilities and what's going on and the nuances and the costs and the, all that stuff?
Well, I can tell you it's a lot, but most of the time it's by touring with families. I'm always getting the new costs. I'm finding out what's changed, just the constant being in them and the contact. And I can't know everything because I don't live there, but I can know a lot.
Right.
So, and I have families in most of them. So if something is not going well, they're going to reach out to me. So I want to make sure that, when we go somewhere that things are as good as they can be, and fit what that person's looking for. But it's really just the inside scoop of, I talk with everybody that does what I do. It used to be like 5 people in the Denver metro area, and now it's probably about 40 at least. Mm. And so we all talk, and, we just say, have you heard this place, they got a new executive director, or have you heard this place just got sold, or, so we try to stay on top of it as much as we can. but I don't hire people in the communities, so I don't have that control. But what I can do is give them more knowledge than they had before.
Well, I mean, you certainly know more than any of us just off the street are going to know looking at a glossy pamphlet, which is, usually
Right.
what you're basing it on, and the tour where they're putting their best foot forward as they should. I'm not begrudging anybody.
No, it's true.
Is part of the conversation you have people also on, I assume it's also on things like on like pricing and all that kind of stuff, because I think it's, the fact that there's an industry, basically not a community fee.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that that's a thing, I'm sure. But I know I have heard, bits and pieces say there's some interesting different ways that these things are paid for and how you have to pay for and what your expectations are and all that. So I assume not just, so cost, but also just how these things are financed, because it's probably different than most of us are used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we do in our assessment. That's the last portion of our assessment is, okay, what on average is this going to cost? Mm-hmm. And I don't get too involved in their finances. I just ask general questions. Okay, what do you get a month for your Social Security? Okay, what's the shortfall difference? Do you have any IRAs, 401ks? Are you going to sell your home if you have a home? Mm. What do you expect that to look like? Do you need a bridge loan if somebody has to go in right away? We look at VA benefits. Do they have long-term care insurance? So we look at the whole picture, and that allows me to know which direction we're going to go.
So if you place somebody, do you have to move somebody again very often?
Not very often, no. Hopefully we do, hopefully things go right the first time, but yeah, it does sometimes happen. Sometimes it's, I'd say the biggest reason is due to behaviors with dementia. Mm. So that maybe just for some reason at that particular place, they're a little bit more amplified, and maybe we can find a place that can work with it better. So it just might even be something as simple as they don't get along with somebody there, or that particular place just isn't staffed as well to handle those behaviors. And that's the kind of thing we try to look at ahead of time. But sometimes they can come out of the woodwork. Right. Behaviors that were not there.
Right. Well, or staffing changes or something about the environment changes, and that can trigger something for people too.
Exactly.
Especially if they're in that space. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you were sharing a story previously with me, and you said it's finally come to a conclusion.
Yes.
Why don't you share that? Because that's a pretty interesting story.
Sure. So I'll preface this by saying many times people are in the wrong place. And by that, I mean they are not in the right level of care. Oh. So I'm going to start by saying many times I'm told by a rehab this person needs a memory care. And after the assessment, I'm like, they do not need a memory care. What makes you think they do? And we come to an understanding, because a lot of times those social workers really don't understand the difference between independent living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled. And sometimes doctors don't. What? Which is really scary. So the story that just recently came to a conclusion was I got a call from a son who said, my mom's at a place, she's in a memory care, and she doesn't like it. Can you find her another memory care? Okay. So I go and meet with her, and she's in this memory care, and I'm going to tell you, sometimes people in memory care are there because they wander, maybe, they need other things, but some of them can present pretty well. So I'm meeting with her, and my gut is just telling me she shouldn't be here. She doesn't need a memory care. And she's telling me that she was driving before this. She lived in her own home. And the more I talked with her, I just kept waiting for something to come out. But it became pretty clear that I actually thought she needed an independent living. So long story short, she had some psych issues. She was having a little bit of a breakdown. Her son tried to take her somewhere, but because she was not suicidal, they wouldn't take her. So they drove to a hospital. She drove herself in Nebraska. And they drove to this hospital, and he told her, say you're suicidal so you can get help. That's what she said. Long story short, she was in that mental hospital for a month. And part of it was because she wasn't really cooperating because she didn't think she needed to be there. And from there, they told the family that she needed a memory care. So I take her out, we start touring places, and I make sure that they have assisted living and a memory care and an independent, because my gut's saying independent, maybe assisted. So many times when someone's under high stress, so they have a lot of anxiety, they're depressed, they have a lot of stress, which, you could think that could be pretty common in that situation. It presents as dementia.
Okay.
So after meeting with this particular person, we toured a few places. There was only one place she liked. Well, she had came from Nebraska. Her doctor's orders were from Nebraska. So we had to get a Colorado doctor to clear and say she didn't need memory care. They came in, they talked with her for maybe 5 minutes and said, no, we don't really know. We're just going to have a neurologist see you. So then she got stuck in the memory care for a month until a neurologist could see her. Because by law, no assisted living can take her if she's coming out of a secured memory care without doctor's orders.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Which I see the logic in it.
Yep.
There's some logic in that. I can get that.
We toured a lot of places, and she only liked one of them. The hard part is they looked at her clinicals and said, wait a minute, she's in a memory care. We're not going to consider her for anything until this is lifted. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand that. But they were a little bit concerned about the psych issues in their community, which I find there's a lot of that. So they didn't want to take her. So she went and saw that neurologist about a month later, which there's a test called the slums. Yep. And I actually had one of the nurses at a community give her that test because I knew that she was in their marketing, but I knew that she was a nurse as well. Mm-hmm. She scored as high as you could score on that.
Okay.
Which basically told me, yeah, I think I'm right here.
Yeah.
So long story short, she went to a neurologist, 6-hour testing. They said, absolutely, you do not need memory care. You probably don't even need assisted living. You could do independent.
Wow.
So I think, yay, that's exciting. So I call up that community and they don't want to take her because they're worried. So that took a little bit of extra work on my part and some other people at that community to at least talk them into doing what was called a respite. Let's do a trial. Let's make sure it works for her. Let's make sure it works for you because she didn't want to go anywhere else. That's the place she liked. So they did that 2-week trial. She's doing wonderful. She's moved in as a permanent resident. And so that story ended well.
Nice.
But I think if the family didn't really know what to do, she would have just got moved to another memory care.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, without an advocate in that situation, how do you, what would you know? I mean, they say, oh, This is the way it is, or this is the law, and you would go, oh, okay.
And that's exactly what happened. They're like, well, the family has said, well, the doctor said this. And I said, I know the doctor said that. But my gut's telling me that's not right.
Yeah.
So then she would have just been kind of in prison.
She would have been in prison. You can't leave.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if you need that level of care, great. But if you don't, I mean, I've visited places like that. I mean, I'm not sure I'd want to stay if I didn't need to be there.
It is a blessing for those that need it.
Yes.
They're with people that are going through similar things. They feel more normalized. They're getting the care they need, people that can anticipate their needs. But if you are an able-bodied person with your full mind, you don't really always have somebody you can have a conversation with other than the staff, and they're busy. And you can't leave unless somebody checks you out and checks you back in.
Wow.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the elder care side of things. So,
Sure.
I mean, I get the placement side makes sense and everything, but the elder care side I'm interested in, again, especially someone who's got, parents, but they're not here, right? And how many people, and even in the life of this church, I've got, tons of, older people whose kids and grandkids are states away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the elder care side is many times, sometimes family is in town, but they just don't have time. Yeah. They're working full time. The kids have their own business. So we have one right now.
Kids have sports.
Exactly. So we have one in Vail where we're going to go up, make sure, that they're being safe. We're looking at some assisted livings just in case. But we're going to do a safety assessment. And then also up there, we're going to be going to the doctors with them. We're going to be setting up home care. So what that means is that we're going to look at the home care companies. We're going to come in, we're going to evaluate them, check their staffing, check their training, and then not only that, but manage it because that can be a lot. So home care companies, if somebody's not coming in, if things aren't going right, you need eyes and ears to do that. So we're going to be the family's eyes and ears. So basically, elder care consulting can be almost anything and has been.
So
it's whatever you're needed for.
Right.
So you say you have somebody that is, they're widowed, they have no kids, they have really no local family to speak of. They need just a power of attorney.
Yeah.
Is that stuff that you guys do?
We get them in touch with somebody who can do power of attorney or conservatorship or guardianship.
Okay.
So that kind of falls under our referral, or if we're doing elder care consulting, then we do find that for them.
So you guys wouldn't be their power of attorney?
No.
You wouldn't? Okay.
That's no. I've been asked to be power of attorneys, but if I need to do placement later, I feel like that's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. But sometimes it's just nice to know somebody has eyes on somebody who's also like a little bit independent, right? For everybody. Because I mean, eventually you get to have that maybe perhaps awkward conversation with your parent or your older loved one and be like, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, it's probably time to start thinking about, you've got somebody who's at least, ostensibly a neutral third party, that's, hopefully built some trust, and can give an opinion that's not just, two people who are very passionate. I mean, obviously we're all passionate about our
a lot of times it's
family.
the neighbors who see them the most. They're like, something needs to happen here.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the last people I saw, their neighbor was the one that called me. And so I often come out to do those difficult conversations and be that mediator, especially if you have, one child who's seen how much care mom or dad needs. The other one is a little bit oblivious and they say, no, you're just trying to put them in a home. Conversations.
Well, I could definitely see the need, and especially since the baby boomers are retiring in droves now. I mean, we've got that whole giant generation of parents and grandparents out there that are, moving into these kind of facilities, and which is I'm sure why we're seeing such a boon in them being built, and there's a lot of need and demand. But then, how do you figure out what you want? How do you figure out what you need?
Well, and the resource you're being, I think, is highly valuable. The aging with dignity concept is one of the things that I really try to position my clients to be able to do, and educating them and giving them choices is one of the first things you do to be able to have that dignity, right? Not be told what you have to do, or you have to go here, or
exactly.
Nope, you can't drive anymore. When people can see that in themselves because they are aware of what's going on, then it's a little bit more dignified than being told.
Yeah.
And that's a big component of what I do and what you do. And the more people we have, the better, to make sure that people can be taken care of the right way.
Yeah. Well, and I can totally see the intersection with your work and why it is you all met each other. I mean, financial planning. I mean, even in our conversations about you, it's a lot about retirement and what do you want to live. And then, I remember even in our conversations talking about things like long-term care insurance and facilities and what do those look like and everything. So you're kind of, ahead of this in a lot of ways in the financial planning side.
I see it. Like, I actually visually see it as their financial advisor, probably because I'm more hyper aware of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I could see when people are maybe making decisions that are different, or, you get a call from the client 3 times in the same day and they ask you the same question.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real telltale sign right there.
Right.
So,
or they're wanting to do some maybe not great for them financial changes. You're like,
Yeah, let's talk about that, kind of thing, and make sure they're not getting, scams are a big thing.
Oh my gosh.
And unfortunately, as much as you do, it's easy to get caught in them. Even people who are experts can get caught in scams, accidentally and whatnot. But I had a romance scam for a client, and it was really sad to see it happen. But I couldn't do anything. Their children couldn't do anything.
I heard one the other day. Somebody called up and represented to be the roofing company from the roofing company that's, literally they had a sign in their front yard saying my roof's being replaced by such and such after the hailstorm. And somebody called up representing to be that roofing company and be like, well, if you wire us your money now, we can give you 20% off, your total bill. And of course they got their insurance money sitting there. And so they just did it, not really thinking about it. And like, well, it was not the roofing company, not to spoil the surprise. And you wouldn't think about it, but I mean, literally they can just drive to the neighborhood and take an address and a phone number and public records and,
So that's how you can get scammed, even though you're wide-eyed. Like, who wouldn't think that'd be bona fide, right? Like, that's pretty in-depth ruse.
Right. And that's the level we're dealing with now. And that was somebody who's younger, professional. I mean, I can imagine, seniors, especially seniors who are still living in their homes, trying to do that, manage a home and a household, so many opportunities to get, taken advantage of, unfortunately, anymore, which may be a reason to think about, moving to some place where you don't have to have those concerns. Managing a house is a lot.
I've had at least 5 clients at least that have had over $1 million taken.
Oh,
And it's almost always a widow.
yes.
After a few years, they meet somebody. They open up their financials. They start writing checks for $1,000, $5,000. They start buying new houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just very discouraging. And I try to do a fraud seminar every year. And just try to keep people aware that it's so prevalent right now.
Yeah.
So prevalent. So if people want to reach out to someone like you, but let's say they're in a different state. I mean, do you guys exist in different states?
Yeah, we are in most states now. I won't say we're in all 50, but we are in most of them. Yeah. So, and if we're not there, you can reach out to Senior Care Authority local or just on the website, and we can refer you to at least another company that we know or that we've had to use in another state.
So then if somebody in Colorado needs help, what area do you specifically cover?
So we can cover all the way from, we actually have a new person now in Colorado Springs. So we can do Colorado Springs all the way to Fort Collins.
Okay. Superb.
And Greeley. So the
if,
entire Denver metro area.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
So they can go on the website and find me directly at Senior Care Authority.
.com.
SeniorCareAuthority.com. And, they can put in their area and find a local person.
Okay.
So, or they can, call me directly. I don't know if you do phone numbers over.
You can put it out if you'd like.
Sure. So my number is 720-408-4700.
Wonderful.
Nice.
So call you direct if
You
they
can
want
call
to do
direct,
that too.
absolutely.
I think one of the themes that I'm learning just from even just doing this podcast and the guests that Roy has brought in is that there's a lot more help out there for you than you think that there is. And I think when you're going through it, when you're at the, rehab hospital and they're telling you, you got 3 days to find grandma someplace to live, you can feel like you're the only person in the world, going through that right now. But chances are you're not. Somebody else has gone through this, and so there's probably some help out there for you if you know where to look or how to Google.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I think that's the thing overall I've learned, just with the different folks that Roy's brought in for us to talk to, but I think this one in general, you might think, oh, this is such a specialty little niche. I'm like, no, there's a lot of people going through this. So there's help out there.
Yeah.
Just go look for help. You don't have to do everything on your own. And especially if the placement servicing is free because, obviously the facilities are invested in getting, the right people in too. Mm-hmm. So that makes all the sense in the world to me.
So what's the fastest you've ever placed somebody?
2 days.
Really?
Wow.
How hard is that?
It's very difficult because not only do you have to find a place with an opening with the right level of care, but you have to do a lot of steps. You have to get doctor's orders. You have to have an assessment done by the community. You have to get their stuff moved in. So it's very involved, and it's not easy to do it that quickly. And many times, even when you think you have to, there's ways like you can do an appeal through Medicare. When you're in the rehab and maybe buy yourself a little bit of time, or even though they tell you have to leave, there's a few things you can do just to give yourself a little bit of time.
So engage you early. So even if somebody's thinking about maybe one day having to do this in the next few years, engage you now so they can educate themselves, do some tours, have a good understanding. If you have to, if you want to get into a facility, I would imagine a lot of places have waiting lists.
Yeah, they do, especially in independent living. Independent living wait lists can be very long. Assisted even has wait lists too. So many times, maybe you're not ready yet, but what you can do is tour communities, get on their wait list when you find just that right one, and they'll call you every time that exact room you want comes open. So if you want a 2-bedroom facing the courtyard, when one of those comes open, they're going to call you. And then usually most places will keep you at the top of that list. So, okay, I'm not ready yet.
Do you have to put your
then
money
later you are.
down to do that?
Yes.
Okay, so you
Yes.
put your, what is it called?
So usually it's more of a deposit, and it can range based on the place. Some places it will be the community fee, but usually it's something like $500, $2,000. And if you end up not going there, it is refundable under most cases.
But
As
then
long
you-
as they haven't done an assessment and already accepted you.
So deposit to kind of keep your name on the list.
Yes.
Get that money back if you don't go there. But community fee you pay when you actually move in.
Correct.
So that's just a one-time fee up front once you're in there.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's just, those nuances to be aware of that people, I mean, I had no clue on some of this stuff, right? And I can't. I mean, I'm an expert in what I do, not in what you do. And that's why we need people like you so that I can have someone to lean on when I know I have somebody who needs that help. I can go to and recommend. And if your financial advisor listening to this, definitely look them up.
Yeah, and also as well, long-term care insurance is such a blessing. Get it when you're younger, and you can definitely talk to more about what age that would be. But the families that have it, their stress level, especially when you have a couple and one needs care and the other does not, and you're looking at $6,000-7,000 a month. For your spouse that maybe does need care and you're trying to stay home, having that long-term care policy is really, really helpful.
And
I think there's an episode for that.
little drop here. We do have an episode for long-term care coming up, actually, where we're going to have an expert come in on that as well.
I'm weirdly excited. Not as excited as I was for Roth conversions, which was weirdly exciting.
It was quite fun.
But yeah, my sister's looking at that right now because she's single. She lives alone. She's getting up about that 50s. And she's just like, I need to get long-term care because who's didn't have any kids, things like that. But just, I think everybody needs to have that conversation about it. So, well, this has been great. It's another one of those places where I think I've learned a lot. I really appreciate it because, and I would say, for financial planners, absolutely. But honestly, for pastors too, because we find ourselves in a situation when people are stuck and they're stressed out, and they're not sure what to do. Sometimes, I'm who they call, or they call the church. And I'm glad to know this is something that exists because you want to offer something helpful. But I don't know. That's not anything. I've been in a lot of them, and I can tell you this one looks better than that one, but that's about all, but I also know enough to know to make sure to take the time, invest the time to make sure you get them somewhere good that fits them, that fits their needs and what's going on. So it's nice to know there's experts out there that people can call on. So, I might post this to some of my clergy groups and be like, hey, do you know this was a thing? Because we all deal with it.
Yeah. Any last little tidbits we need to be aware of?
No, not really.
Fantastic.
I think we covered quite a lot, and it was a good conversation.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. I've enjoyed learning a lot more about it. I'm sure we're going to talk more in the future.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Roy. And thank you all for listening and taking a moment to participate in the About Podcast. You can check us out at theaboutpodcast.com. We've got a lot of episodes there and a lot more coming up. If you have any suggestions for topics or things that you're curious about or questions that have come up for you, please let us know. We love having that feedback from you all. All right. Well, I think we did a good one here.
Yes, sir. Thanks again, everybody.
All right,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
CWA is a Securities and Exchange Registered Investment Advisor. No content contained herein should be construed as an offer for investment advice or an offer for the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. Investments involve the risk of low loss, including loss of principal. Please consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before implementing any strategy presented here. Data presented here are obtained from believed reliable sources but cannot be guaranteed as to completeness or accuracy.